Hi, if you want to watch exclusive content with hot girls that you won't watch on YouTube, namely where Naruto roasts Kushina and Mikoto and many other hot girls without restrictions, then visit my Boosty channel at the link in the description.
The doorbell rang twice, and Itachi raised his head, distracted from the TV. Who could come on Sunday without an invitation? Maybe the neighbors needed something? Oh, if only not the Jehovah's Witnesses, although Madara had scared them so much last time with satanic songs under Sasuke's crazy laughter that it was unlikely that any sectarians would ring their doorbell now. He got up from the couch, brushing cookie crumbs off his shirt. It seemed that neither Madara nor Sasuke were going to answer the call. Moving lazily around the apartment, he shuffled his slippers to the door, without even looking through the peephole, and opened it. The hallway was empty. Was someone making a joke? Or perhaps while he was rolling off the couch, the callers had managed to leave, thinking that no one was home. There were some strange sounds from below, and Uchiha lowered his head. A large dark blue baby carrier stood on the rug, covering the sign "Get Lost." Sasuke and Madara had a specific sense of humor. Something moved inside the cradle, and Itachi blinked. It didn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that there was a living child lying there. An envelope stood out on the light beige blanket, and he bent down to pick it up and open it. "This is your child. I'm sorry I had to leave him like this, but I need to leave urgently. It won't be for long. You didn't answer your phone, so here it is. His name is Menma. Please take care of him. With love, and you." Uchiha read and looked down again at the cradle where the child was sleeping. He knew that the child was not his, because he had been in a steady relationship for a couple of years already, but that didn't make it any easier. Itachi carefully carried the package into the house and placed it on the couch. Okay. Good. The child was not his, because he was a beta and dating a fellow beta man. But his uncle and brother were alphas who did not deny themselves one-night stands. Sasuke, Madara, come here." He ran his eyes over the lines again and swallowed hard. He pulled back the blanket a little and sighed. "Well, yes, Uchiha. Jet black hair and pale skin even at that age. Besides, the sender somehow got into their apartment building and left the cradle right outside their door, which meant he knew exactly who to leave it to." Sasuke stumbled out of the room, boring his brother with a heavy look, his whole appearance conveying that he hadn't slept half the night, and their uncle, who was barely older than Itachi, responded discontentedly from somewhere in the kitchen, but then nevertheless went out into the living room, wiping his face with cucumber slices as he went. "What?" Madara blew his bangs that had fallen over his eyes and stood next to him. "Whose is this?" Itachi pointed his finger towards the cradle. All three of them stared at the child, who, apparently sensing their attention, woke up. Menma looked around at everyone with his blue eyes, thought for a few seconds, then took a deep breath and began to cry, drowning out all other sounds with his scream. "Do something." Sasuke instantly woke up and jumped away from the couch. "We need to feed it, then this will shut up." Madara nodded, looking with horror at the child's face turning red from crying. "What do the children eat?" Itachi watched the two roommates with a detached expression. He had helped his mother with his younger brother, but that had been so long ago that all memories of taking care of children remained in his head as a blurry haze. "Something soft," Sasuke reasoned. "Milk? We have milk? Wait. Maybe this isn't ours at all. So it's not ours to worry about." The oldest of them grinned and snatched the paper from Itachi's hand. "Who is NU?" I think if you hadn't slept with everyone, this question wouldn't have arisen. He didn't miss the chance to tease both of them, although his voice sounded quite indifferent. Sasuke glared at his brother and headed towards the door. "Hey! Where are you going?" Madara narrowed his eyes unkindly. Where? To the store. The child needs to eat something." Sasuke pulled on his sneakers and ran out of the apartment, away from the child's crying. All this happened for a couple of minutes, and he was already panicking. "What should we do?" Itachi tilted his head to the side, examining the child. If it weren't for the color of his eyes, one could definitely tell that the child was a small copy of one of the Uchiha. "I don't know. Should I calm him down?" "Oh yeah. Sunday." And the supermarket was, of course, teeming with people. Sasuke's hatred of humanity immediately shot up to the dangerous level. But, oddly enough, the baby food section was almost empty. He stood in front of a row of various tins that led to disgusting-looking purees in glass jars. How could anyone eat something like that? Anything to suggest? The woman smiled broadly, seeing the young daddy. Yeah, he barely managed to force himself to ask, but it was much faster to ask than to stand and read something on the labels. I need food for the baby. Yeah, that's great nutrition. Contains all the necessary vitamins and microelements, and also. Just give me something for the baby, he said through gritted teeth. Are his teeth coming in already? Teeth? Well, yes. Constantly cries, puts his hands in his mouth, drools everywhere, she nodded. Because then you need to. Okay. Okay. I'll take this. And this. And this too. Thanks for the information. Sasuke took several tin cans with a picture of a baby, threw them into the cart and hurried to disappear into another department. Having grabbed a couple of packs of diapers, various nipples and a strange-looking pacifier, and then a little bit of everything else, he brazenly cut in line at the checkout and flew out of the store. Although it was probably worth wandering around longer, just so as not to return back to the apartment and not encounter the problem that had arisen. He threw the door open, dropping the bags to the floor with a thud, and stared at the two men. The baby was still screaming. Madara was sitting on the floor, his knees pulled up to his chest, his fingers tangled in his dark locks, and Itachi looked miserable as he tried to rock the baby in his arms. Was he crying this whole time? Sasuke raised a dark eyebrow. No, I kept quiet until I saw Madara, Itachi explained melancholically, a little disoriented by the loud crying. He hates me. My child hates me, he whispered in horror, ruffling his long hair. What makes you think he's yours? In fact, Sasuke would have been very happy to dump this burden on his uncle, but he decided to argue purely for the sake of principle. I don't know. Not yours, the man snorted. You yourself said that you only sleep with betas, and only men. The argument had quite a clear effect, and the younger Uchiha even became inspired. Excellent, so the problem wasn't his. The three of them would have to sort it out, of course, but he had successfully pushed some of the responsibility off himself. The joy didn't last very long. A disgusting smell floated through the living room. No. No. Just don't tell me that. Yes, he did. Itachi looked at the calmed-down child, who seemed very happy that he had arranged a fun day off for the three men. I bought them. Here, Sasuke picked up the package of diapers, looking at his brother and uncle in confusion. So. What do we do with it? They crowded around the child, who was lying on a clean towel and looking back at the men, trying to stuff his own heel into his mouth. Should I wash it? Sasuke suggested. Wash it, Madara agreed. Wash it yourself, it's your child, the younger one grinned vindicatively. Give me some napkins. Itachi caught the baby's gaze and now did not allow him to be distracted, fearing a new burst of crying. His brother handed him a pack of wet wipes and tore open the plastic wrapper of diapers. Do you know that it says 8 to 12 here? Madara looked closely and frowned. It's like months. How old is he? No teeth. So, no older than 6 months, the uncle nodded meaningfully, and then frowned. A year ago, Maybe a little more. I don't remember what happened then. Some kind of filming, I think. But Sasuke remembered. He almost got into a big mess back then. Working as a graphic and web designer. He often completed orders without leaving home. But back then, the work was in the office, because Orochimaru offered a large sum of money and a wide circle of connections. For someone who had just graduated, this was an amazing opportunity. A reserve for the future. Besides, Sasuke knew the old snake, he often completed orders while still at university. In fact, the marketing department was not stressed, and Sasuke, in fact, received money for doing nothing. And there he met a cute guy from the finance department. He kept laughing, that he was new, did not understand anything and did not know anything in the office, and the Uchiha told him everything he knew about the company and Orochimaru in between sex and work. He wanted to help. It's good that he managed to quit before the entire office was tied up for dirty deeds. Orochimaru was safely behind bars. I wonder if that kid was under investigation too. Probably not. He was new. Fair-haired, cute, and had such a wide smile. Too bad he wasn't an Omega. Maybe Sasuke would have offered him something more. Well, that was further proof that the child wasn't his. Great. Done, Itachi exclaimed after tense minutes of wiping and putting a diaper on the baby. Bring some tape. Otherwise the diaper will slip off. What do you mean whiskey? Madara became inspired. I mean duct tape. He rolled his eyes and picked Menma up. The baby smiled toothlessly and grabbed the man by a silky black lock of hair. Don't pull my hair, please. Menma blinked and obediently let go of Itachi's hair. How did you do that? Sasuke asked in a whisper. I don't know, the brother answered in a whisper. I brought scotch tape. Both options, Madara whispered. So. Fed, put to bed, victory, the eldest of the Uchihas collapsed on the sofa and buried his face in the pillow. What should I do with him tomorrow? I have to go to the shooting. I'm working too. Itachi turned to his brother, still clutching the plastic bottle with the nipple in his shaking hand. Who knew that even feeding a baby was a whole ordeal? Do you think I can handle this alone? Maybe we should call someone? Sasuke tried to keep his eyes open, but he was falling asleep more and more. No one. And it will take a long time to find a nanny, Madara muttered, hanging his arm off the sofa. Shoo. All three raised their heads, listening. There was silence in the apartment for a few seconds, but it was broken by a piercing child's cry, followed by the synchronized groan of three men. What does he want? Madara was rocking the crying child in his arms. They had already put the baby to sleep twice, but he obviously wanted to stay awake. I checked everything. Maybe he's in pain somewhere? Itachi suggested. Sasuke wisely locked himself in his room and ignored the tearful calls of his roommates for help. Look it up on the internet. The older one tried to put a pacifier in the child's mouth, but got it in the forehead. Menma had already had a good throw. Itachi sat in front of the laptop screen for a few minutes, frowning. It's either colic due to unusual nutrition, or... Okay, let's hope for the best. What do you mean, for good? Madara narrowed his eyes and hissed. Silence fell in the room, and the two men looked at the child in unison. He was looking at them both carefully. He likes it when you're unhappy, it seems. Yes? Do you like it? Madara addressed the baby. Oh, I am very unhappy. I have to be in the studio in 6 hours. And do you know how big my dark circles under my eyes will be? No damn concealer will be able to cover them up. Menma smiled and closed his eyes sleepily. Don't stop, Itachi whispered. Interesting. The child fell asleep to discontented grumbling. Or just to emotional speech. So this Inu is a very expressive person. I'm going to look like a fucking zombie, you know? The makeup artist is going to freak out when he sees my face. And there's that asshole Hashirama on set. I just can't look worse than him on camera. Madara paused to take a breath and noticed that the child had fallen asleep. At least we found a way to rock him. Next time, give him to Sasuke. He's always dissatisfied with everything. The child will sleep with him all day long. The man carefully put Menma in the cradle and walked to his bedroom, hoping to sleep a little more. The set was already noisy at such an early hour. Workers were running back and forth, adjusting the lighting, adjusting the scenery in the pavilion and clarifying the script. The actors involved were very popular, having acted in both full-length films and abroad, in a word, having colossal experience and popularity, and great hopes were pinned on this drama. In addition, not a single actor had ever been harmed by a mass project on a federal channel. Madara knew that he couldn't play badly in principle. His acting talent had been evident in all its glory since he was in diapers, but his co-star irritated him to such an extent that it was reflected on his face. Didn't sleep well? Hashirama asked worriedly. They had already finished applying his makeup, and now all the man's attention was focused on his colleague. Madara gritted his teeth, holding back a caustic comment. The makeup artist was desperately trying to cover up the bruises and grayish complexion, but today was clearly not the best day. You know, meditation helps a lot. It keeps your mental state in balance, hence the good sleep. Hashirama smiled broadly. Do you want me to? I want you to shut up, Uchiha glared at him. Senju obediently shut up, but remained sitting next to him like a loyal dog. And this is the best actor in the country? The sexiest man according to all these stupid magazines? Uchiha gritted his teeth even harder. Being number 2 after this idiot was even more offensive. We have changes in the script. Mito entered the dressing room and shook the papers. Has the director told you yet? What is it? Madara sighed. Well, it's definitely not his day. For comic effect, there will be a kissing scene, she grinned, raising a red eyebrow and looking at the clearly nervous makeup artist who was trying to make something bearable out of the Uchiha's murdered face. Who has the honor of kissing you, Mito-san? Hashirama laughed and slapped Madara on the thigh. If the Uchiha didn't care about his reputation, he would have ripped the laughing idiot's arm off. What? Me? No. Remember the scene where you two fight? That's where you two have to lean in to kiss my cheeks, and I pull away, and it turns out that you're kissing, she smiled. Fan service and all that, guys. Our drama has high ratings, but we need even more to get renewed for a second season. We have a threshold to cross, so don't let us down. Hashirama let out an excited cry and laughed again, and Madara closed his eyes tiredly. Definitely not his day. It was a quiet day at the small but successful Akatsuki law firm. Yahiko, their usual troublemaker, had taken the day off. Konan was monotonously clicking her mouse, checking her mail. The atmosphere was rather sleepy. Itachi had already hit his forehead on the table for the 3rd time, his head kept slipping off the hand that was supporting it. Nagato only glanced sideways with concern and carefully slipped a thick folder to his sleeping colleague to soften the blows, otherwise going to the meeting with a bump would be unpresentable. Do you remember that the hearing is at 12? He asked quietly. Give me some napkins, Uchiha muttered without raising his head. Here, Nagato placed a pack of wet wipes next to Itachi's hand. Yeah. There was also powder there, and the diaper was too big, we need a different size, he continued talking somewhere into a folder. Are you okay? What diaper? A hand fell on the dark-haired head. This woke the Uchiha up a little. He jumped up in his chair, straightening up. The meeting is at 12. Yes, Itachi patted his cheeks and looked for his cell phone. Why aren't you eating? Sasuke looked at the child, frowning. The website says you should eat every 2 hours. Eat. Menma smiled even wider and even laughed. Okay. You don't want to eat, you don't want to sleep either. What should we do with you then? Uchiha sighed tiredly and typed into the search engine. What to do with babies if they don't sleep and don't want to eat? The search returned several strange websites and a bunch of photos of various strollers. Oh. Okay, we'll solve the issue of walks in the evening. The child cooed in agreement and kicked Sasuke in the cheek as he leaned towards him, which greatly amused the little boy. I wonder who Madara gave it to that turned you into, he muttered irritably, rubbing his cheek. Probably some blue-eyed, cheerful idiot. I remembered that guy from Orochimaru's office again. Yeah, he was funny. Only Sasuke changed his phone number right after he quit, so he lost all his contacts, Too bad, I'd love to meet him now, relieve the stress. The phone beeped unpleasantly, as if the device sensed that it was remembered, and Uchiha picked up the receiver, still playing a staring contest with the child. Is everything okay? Itachi's voice was interrupted by a loud yawn. Yes. He's still alive. Sasuke reached into the cradle and grinned when Menma grabbed the long fingers with his small fists. Have you fed him? Have you checked his diaper? Do you understand that he could choke and die from suffocation? Why are you so worried about him? Maybe he's yours? Does Shursui know? The younger one even narrowed his eyes with pleasure. Teasing his brother was a sacred thing. People have been giving birth and raising children for thousands of years. It shouldn't be that difficult. Sasuke. It's okay. He's chewing on my finger. Does that mean he's hungry? Sasuke raised an eyebrow, watching the child concentrate on clamping his finger between his gums. Maybe he's teething? Is he drooling? Itachi even sat up straight in his chair, ignoring Nagato's interested gaze. Kids drool all the time, he snorted. Is that a bad thing? Very. Okay. I'm going. Try not to kill him. I'm not promising anything, Sasuke chuckled and hung up. Tell me you're not teething. Menma had already pulled the other man's finger out of his mouth, but he still hadn't let go of Uchiha's hand. He yawned and closed his eyes, pressing the narrow, graceful palm to himself. This caused the eternally sullen man to smile tenderly, but fortunately no one saw it. What are you looking at? Itachi sat down next to him on the couch. It was time to go to bed, but his gaze caught on his overly focused brother. Menma was put to bed, and now the apartment was unusually quiet. No one wanted to deal with a crying child again. Strollers. You need to walk with him. Sasuke opened a few more tabs, carefully reading the descriptions. Get a transformer, so that it will last for 2 or 3 years, he yawned widely. Good idea, the younger one nodded. Have you forgotten that he is with us temporarily? Madara, who had been silent all evening, finally spoke. We don't know how long this temporary will last. What if this Enyu doesn't come back for him at all? Sasuke himself didn't understand why he was defending the child's position, but since they had been given this burden, they had to fulfill their duties well. This red one is cute. Itachi ignored his uncle's attack and pointed his finger at the laptop screen. It's expensive. Sasuke shook his head and also switched on the mode of ignoring his sullen relative. Maybe this one then? It's gray, it'll get dirty less. The price is quite decent. I don't want to disturb your idol, Madara responded sarcastically. But a child needs to go for walks not only in a stroller, but also in clothes. And he's already trying to sit, which means he needs a high chair for the kitchen. The brothers looked at each other and sighed heavily. It looked like the 4 of them would be going to the store tomorrow. Sasuke clicked on the buy button. At least one thing was done. Are you avoiding me? Hashirama looked at him like a guilty dog, crumpling the hem of his shirt with his fingers. Yes, Madara answered, trying to think of somewhere to go before filming began. He had already taken coffee. The makeup artist hadn't been overworking himself today because Uchiha had managed to get enough sleep and look fresh, so there was still plenty of time. Maybe he should run to the director? Anything to get away from Hashirama. Sorry. I got carried away yesterday. I didn't mean to scare you. Senja lowered his head in shame. Got carried away? You kissed me as if you wanted to shove your tongue down my throat, he hissed, squinting threateningly. We should have just touched lips. Well, we did that for the first 8 takes, then I wanted to diversify it a bit. Is that why you started to get handsy? Madara squeezed the plastic coffee cup in his hand. It was a joke. Well, now I understand that it was a bad one. Hashirama blushed to the tips of his ears. Yes, very unfortunate. Uchiha passed by, pushing the man with his shoulder. I understand why you follow me. Keep in mind that nothing will work out with 2 alphas anyway. But. What but? He turned sharply, showing off his thick hair. I'm an Omega, Hashirama said quietly, looking around to check for any strange ears. Madara blinked, looking at the man, who was almost a head taller than Uchiha, broader in the shoulders, and generally had a very masculine build. Compared to him, Uchiha himself could be called an Omega. The statement sounded, at the very least, unconvincing. He had met all sorts of people, of course, but this was the first time he had heard such blatant nonsense. Yeah, right, he grinned. Think of something more interesting. You believe in stereotypes? Senju smiled and shrugged awkwardly. It wasn't every day he shared this little secret. Omegas have different bodies just like everyone else. We're just given the ability to bear a child, that's all. And you leak and stink. Madara had nothing against it, but he had to humiliate Hashirama now. Especially after yesterday. Admitting to himself that he liked kissing his hated competitor was beyond his dignity. He expected the Omega to get angry, but he smiled broadly, which only made Madara even more angry. I drink suppressants, so my smell shouldn't bother you. I hope so. Hashirama clapped him on the shoulder and walked towards the necessary pavilion. Still, he looked clearly hurt, which pleased the Uchiha greatly. Sasuke was left alone with the child again and was even able to work. Menma behaved rather quietly. Apparently, he got used to it and now he could quite calmly lie in the cradle and listen to the disgruntled grumbling of an adult, cursing stupid customers who themselves do not understand what they want. He obediently went to bed and ate normally, even pleasantly surprised Uchiha with the lack of whims. The stroller was delivered in the afternoon, so Sasuke simply wrapped the baby in a warm blanket and tried the device out. The first walk could be considered a success, which he reported in a text message to his brother and uncle. Yes, these are the little joys that appeared in their lives with the baby. In the evening, the three men managed to dress the child in the clothes he had been delivered to their door a couple of days earlier and went to the children's supermarket. There weren't many people, which made Madara and Sasuke noticeably happy. It guaranteed quiet shopping without any hustle and bustle. "I'm going for food and some hygiene stuff." Itachi looked at the large signs hanging near the ceiling and indicating the departments, and looked down at the list he had compiled. "You go for clothes and toys. Meet me at the third checkout." He hurried to disappear among the shelves, leaving his uncle and brother with the child, who was curiously looking at the ceiling of the store from the stroller. "What's closer?" Madara glanced fearfully at the long rows of something bright and loud. "Toys. Let's go there." Sasuke sighed and directed the stroller right into this terrifying thing. "What do children of this age usually play with? Why don't you call your mother and ask?" He picked up a strange-looking object from the shelf. "What's that yellow pill in the overalls?" "Put it back." Sasuke rolled his eyes and carried Menma on. "I want to buy him a stuffed toy." Madara was visibly inspired and pulled the child out of the stroller. He was only happy and actively waved his hands, smiling with his toothless mouth. "Look. What do you like?" He turned the child towards the stand. "It's no use. He'll grab the first thing he can find." The younger one snorted and, to prove his point, handed the little boy a fluffy cat. Menma felt the cat and frowned, pulling his hand back. "You see. He doesn't like it. He already has preferences." "He's smart." Madara nodded, as if it was his personal merit. "Okay, bring it closer." When the baby found himself in close proximity to the toys, he grabbed the tail of the red fox, which was almost as big as the baby, and pulled it towards himself. "Well, that's chosen. Now we need to get some squeaking and rattling things." Sasuke rubbed his temple, already imagining how the house would be filled with annoying sounds. Speaking of sounds, two boys in school uniforms rushed past, clearly enjoying the fact that they had gotten their hands on the plastic weapons section. "Haha, look, he does that too," one of them shouted, holding out a toy gun and pressing a button. The toy lit up and made a sound very similar to a real shot. Menma visibly shook in Madara's arms and burst into loud cries. "What's wrong with him?" The man looked in surprise at the child who had been smiling just a few seconds ago and began to rock him soothingly. He was probably scared by the loud noise. Sasuke shrugged, although something inside told him that it wasn't the volume that was the issue, but the sound itself, because a couple of times he dropped pots in the kitchen with a crash, and it didn't scare the child. Maybe then, to hell with them, these rattles? Let's just take a couple for the stroller and that's it. Madara began to rock the child more diligently, but he seemed to flinch in fear and continued to scream. "Sasuke, he's crying. Can children be so scared? How should I know?" He growled and took Menma himself, immediately pressing her to his chest. "Go get some stuff, I'll try to calm her down." The uncle nodded in agreement and almost ran off to look for rattles. The child was indeed crying loudly, shaking and trustingly clinging to the Uchiha's clothes with his hands. Sasuke somehow calmed him down, just in time for Madara to appear with a bunch of various beepers and rattling irritants, designed to distract the child from any adversity. "All that's left is to choose clothes," the elder said with relief, watching as Menma calmed down, still sobbing briefly. Sasuke felt uneasy about the baby's strange behavior. A whole week had passed since the day the three men had found the unexpected package on their doorstep. Sasuke had adapted to daytime existence because of the baby. Itachi had taken work home a couple of times to help his brother, and something strange was happening to Madara. He was thoughtful and quiet, and had stopped even mentioning that Menma was with them temporarily. Maybe he had warmed up to the baby, or maybe he had simply accepted the fact. At least he spent a lot of time with the baby, and in the evenings he put him to bed himself, whining dramatically. And now the eldest of the family was trying to feed the child in the kitchen, and Sasuke, passing by the cradle in the living room and holding a pile of laundry in his arms, remembered that it would be good to change the sheets in it, too. He pulled out the contents of the carrier that played the role of the baby's crib and froze. On the inner lining, a dark stain was visible on the side. It looked like dark chocolate. He bent down to take a closer look at the incomprehensible blot, scratched it with his fingernail and suddenly recoiled, fully realizing that the dark substance was dried blood. There was not a scratch on Menma's body, which meant... It meant a lot of things. Who knows whose blood it was, who knows where it came from. But the small incident in the store came to mind very opportunely, and again a bad feeling tickled somewhere in the solar plexus. It wasn't for nothing that this NU left the child on someone else's doorstep. He was distracted from this mini-investigation by the ringing of his cell phone, and Sasuke grabbed the phone, seeing his brother's name on the screen. "I'll stay the night at Shirsue's. Can you handle it together?" Madara doesn't leave him. "I think so," Sasuke grinned. He couldn't forbid his brother to have a personal life. Besides, Shirsue was a very nice person even by Sasuke's standards. It's good that he's finally imbued with paternal feelings. If this NU doesn't show up, Madara will have to draw up documents for the baby. Although it wouldn't be bad now either, Itachi reasoned. By the way, about that NU. I found something. Shirsue is a policeman, we'll need his help. The younger one glanced at the blood stain again. I wouldn't want to drag him into this. Something serious? It's hard to say yet, Sasuke sighed and rubbed the bridge of his nose. Okay, we'll see how the situation goes. Good. Good luck to you two there. Itachi began to sound a little more tense, but he was in no hurry to panic because of his brother's words. Yeah, bye. He hung up and covered the cradle with clean linen, hiding the dark stain. Having done this, Sasuke decided to check out the situation in the kitchen. You understand? I don't understand either. First he kisses me so hard that it takes my breath away, and then he turns it all into a joke. And now he avoids me. Well, I said a few sweet words to him, but that's no reason, right? Madara gesticulated emotionally in front of the child, and Menma eagerly watched the man's every move, smiling. The younger Uchiha rolled his eyes, finding this to be normal, and retreated back to the washing machine. Once the chores were done, he went to his room to collapse on his bed and sleep until the night shift. Since Madara was putting the baby to bed today, Sasuke would be the one making all the nightly visits to the baby's cries. Those were the rules. Hey, Sasuke team, let's go have lunch. The blonde grabbed him by the shoulders and rested his chin on the top of his head. Don't do that. He threw off the stranger's hands and lazily rose from the chair, stretching his lower back as he went. Okay, I won't. But only at work, the guy giggled, playing with his eyebrows, and rushed to the door with a loud laugh. Idiot, Sasuke grinned and followed. Those blue eyes seemed to glow from within. And such a wide smile. Beautiful. In general, this sunny guy was beautiful, and the Uchiha loved cute faces. Sasuke shuddered and opened his eyes. Menma was crying next to him, drawing attention to himself. Madara must have brought the cradle here when he put the baby to bed. The man rubbed his face, finally waking up. The plan was simple: check the diaper, feed, calm, go back to sleep. But the diaper was dry, the bottle didn't work, the rattle didn't work either, even the plush fox didn't help calm the baby. What's wrong? Uchiha sighed and ran his hand over the baby's head. The next second he flew out of the room and burst into his uncle's without knocking. Are you nuts? The man lifted his head from the pillow and narrowed his eyes unkindly, his whole appearance promising his nephew a quick death. Menma has a fever, the younger one said, gasping for breath. Madara jumped out of bed and walked into the next room, pulling his disheveled hair into a crooked bun as he went. What should we do now? I don't know, should I call a doctor? Sasuke picked up the child and looked around the room with a bewildered look, looking for a phone. An ambulance? They won't come. He grabbed his nephew's mobile phone. Let's Google it. Menma had no intention of calming down and stubbornly stuck his hand in his mouth, muffling his scream. What is he doing? Chewing his fist and drooling, Madara pulled his small hand away and stuck his finger in the child's mouth, feeling his gums. Well, that was the instruction on the parenting website. He had read many such articles this week, fully realizing the responsibility that now lay on him. Looks like teething. And that's why it's hot. Sasuke snorted skeptically. Well, yes. True, this knowledge doesn't give us much. I don't know, should we bring down his temperature? How do you even measure it in babies? Okay, keep an eye on him, and I'll go to the pharmacy. He handed the baby into Madara's hands and ran out of the room, grabbing his jacket. The apartment building where the trio lived was in a pretty decent area, although that didn't guarantee the absence of strange individuals on the streets at night. But when a disheveled man with a crazy expression runs past the houses, it's unlikely that any robber would dare to approach without worrying about his life. The streets were lit by the occasional street lamp and neon signs, but many of the signs with green and red crosses were already out, indicating closure. Sasuke reached the nearest 24-hour drugstore in a matter of minutes and gripped the door handle, catching his breath. He had run at least 3 blocks, and now he clutched his side, hoping he wouldn't pass out from the sudden exertion. The white light from the drugstore hit his eyes unpleasantly after the pitch darkness, which was not very well diluted by the signs and lanterns. There was no one in the hall, and he went up to the cash register, looking for the button. Having pressed the white plastic circle, above which rested a welcoming inscription, he impatiently shifted from one foot to the other and licked his lips, dry from running. A few seconds later, the door behind the counter opened, and a red-haired girl came out, rubbing her sleepy eyes. "Hello. How can I help you?" she said weakly, putting on her glasses. "Oh, Sasuke?" "Hello, Karen." He even managed to be a little surprised and happy. It would be easier to explain to a familiar person what he wanted, although he would definitely not avoid questions. Sasuke remembered that she also worked for Orochimaru in the development department. That's where they met, I think. "Long time no see," she smirked, casting an appraising glance at him and instantly assuming a seductive pose. At this hour he probably came for condoms. Yeah. Listen, can you help? I need a baby thermometer. I don't even know how to measure children's temperatures. You? A child? She blinked in surprise, instantly losing all her ardor. Yes, people do know how to change. Karen remembered this mysterious designer guy and felt genuine interest. Too bad it was unanswered. However, it seemed that Sasuke did answer someone. She stepped away for a few seconds and returned with a small box. You put it on your forehead and hold it for a bit. Anything else? Yes, an antipyretic. Anyway, Menma is teething. He tiredly rubbed his face with his palm, not even noticing that he called the child by name. The night will probably be nervous and sleepless. Menma. What an interesting name. Karen frowned slightly and disappeared from sight again. She returned with a couple of boxes, a strange-looking green silicone thing and a tube of gel. Look. These are suppositories. If the temperature rises above 38, use them. If not, then these. The dosage is smaller, got it? This is a gel for gums. And this is a special scratcher so that he doesn't put everything in his mouth, but only this thing. Sasuke nodded, carefully remembering the information. Thank you, you've been incredibly helpful, he exhaled, taking the bills out of his wallet. You're welcome. Come by sometime, I'll give you a discount card. She smiled and twirled a red strand of hair around her finger. When the door closed and the pharmacy was empty again, Karen pulled her cell phone out of her robe pocket. It seemed that Sasuke had reciprocated not just anyone, but the same blonde who had derailed her entire research career. After thinking for a few minutes, she finally unlocked the screen and dialed the number. Kabuto-san. I think I know something about the child. I'm not sure, but it's worth checking. Before entering the pavilion, Madara put some drops in his eyes so that they wouldn't be so red. The makeup artist almost died over his face again, but he did his job. After Sasuke returned, they measured the temperature, inserted a suppository into the child with great difficulty. Itachi would have definitely quipped that it was more difficult for them than inserting a penis into such a place, fed him and smeared his gums with gel. Only after all these manipulations did Menma fall asleep and allow the men to also pass out until about 6 o'clock. Madara sighed and walked on, almost falling asleep as he walked. The sudden collision had visibly invigorated him. Oh. Sorry, strong arms kept him from falling, and someone else's long strands tickled his face. Hashirama smiled awkwardly, putting his victim on his feet and loosening his embrace, and hurried away, but the Uchiha grabbed him by the wrist and narrowed his eyes unkindly. Why are you running from me? I just thought that you could smell me even through the suppressors and you didn't like it. I didn't want to cause any inconvenience, Senju shrugged. Are you an idiot? Madara rolled his eyes and snorted. Every time we happen to film together, you walk around very nervous and angry. The smell of omegas sometimes affects alphas like that, forgive me. A little over a year ago, you were constantly snapping at everyone, and I was just cutting back on the dosage back then. Hashirama smiled, and Uchiha finally remembered that he really had filmed with Senju a year ago and was on edge. Because of Hashirama, not his smell. Because that smiling idiot was his main rival in everything. As soon as they appeared together in some project, Madara ate poorly, slept poorly, and couldn't even have sex. This thought sounded an alarm bell, but Uchiha promised himself to think about it later. No, it's because your face irritates me, not your smell, he hissed. Oh, well, I can't do anything about that, Senju smiled again. Why do you even need to do anything? Madara sighed tiredly, but he still didn't let go of his hand. Because I like you. And the least I can do for you is not to irritate you, Hashirama said it so simply that the Uchiha had an emergency brain reboot. Do you like me? He whispered, afraid to repeat the words louder. Yes, quite a long time ago. But I understand that not everything in this life is mutual, the man laughed quietly, freeing his hand, and moved on, leaving Madara to process the information received. Itachi arrived in the afternoon, having been to work and taking papers home. He looked well rested and refreshed, unlike his younger brother, who kept falling asleep next to the cradle, placing his hand in it so that Menma wouldn't cry. The child was vigorously rubbing his gums with green silicone and admiring the ceiling. Someone else's hand was preventing him from sitting up, and he didn't really try to push it off. Hello, Itachi glanced at the crumpled drug labels scattered on the coffee table along with the packs. Menma responded with a grunt and smiled, drooling on his chin. After putting everything away properly and taking the medicines to the medicine cabinet, he returned and carefully pulled his sleeping brother's hand out of the carrier, and then picked up the child in his arms. Hungry? He carried the baby into the kitchen, and he was only too glad to exchange the sight of the whitewashed ceiling and the edges of the cradle for something else. He didn't really eat it, but he was happy to chew on the rubber tip of the bottle. Itachi smiled and reached for his phone. After taking a couple of photos of the baby, he thought, tapping the edge of the phone, and sent them to a specific subscriber. A few seconds later, the phone vibrated in his hand, and Uchiha ran his finger over the green receiver icon. Yes, Mom? Well, how do you explain this? Mikoto sounded worried. It seems you've become an aunt, Itachi smiled at the child, who now focused all his attention on the speaker. I knew Madara would do something like this, she sighed. What's his name? Menma. Do you want me to make you happy? He moved the chair closer and tried to take the bottle from the baby, but he grabbed it with his gums even more tightly. Yes, I'm glad as it is. Such a cutie. Can I come and look at my nephew? Your father never leaves work, it's boring at home, she laughed quietly into the phone. And Madara needs to be hit on the head for his indiscretion. It's understandable. Being the chief of the city police is not the easiest job. Itachi could no longer remember what exactly he wanted to please his mother with, fighting with the child for the chewed pacifier. Come, of course. At the same time, you can consult Sasuke on matters of upbringing. Why Sasuke? He works from home, so he sits with Menma all the time. Although Madara takes over for him in the evenings, he finally took the bottle away and gave the child a green gum scratcher. It's good for both of them, Mikoto laughed again. Children learn responsibility. Okay, I'll stop by in the evening. We'll wait. Itachi hung up and turned to the doorway, where his sleepy brother appeared. Snitched? He yawned and moved towards the coffee maker. A little, Itachi agreed. Does Menma have a fever? It was at night, now it seems not. Sasuke sat down at the table and propped his head up with his hand, trying to keep his eyes open. After the night incident, everything else flew out of his head, and he didn't even remember about the blood stain, and the elder was worried about the child's condition. Should I take him for a walk? He pushed the bottle towards his brother, who nodded gratefully, pressing on the plastic edges and pouring milk into his coffee mug. No. Madara will come and have fun, but on the weekends he is yours. The younger Uchiha almost rolled over his mug and hissed discontentedly. Menma liked this performance, and he laughed. Shursui will come on Sunday. Itachi moved the napkin holder and smiled. The three of you will have a fun time. Sasuke finally took a sip of the invigorating coffee, squinting sarcastically. The front door clicked, and the rustling of clothes was heard. Madara slowly floated into the kitchen and snatched the mug from his nephew's hands, immediately pouring its contents into himself. You're early. Are you ahead of the filming schedule? Itachi had already figured out what to cook for lunch and dinner, since the whole family was gathered, and his mother was planning to come. It seems like I'm dating Hashirama now, he said in a strangled voice and sat down at the table, looking ahead in horror. So he knows you have a child? Mikoto stroked the baby's black hair. Menma, to everyone's surprise, very willingly went into her arms and now clearly enjoyed the attention and caress of soft female palms. Yes. He even liked it. Madara hugged the sofa cushion to himself, frowning. So, how did this happen? Everyone in this house, even the little one, knew that Hashirama Senju was the main evil in the man's life. He said he liked me. I asked him what would happen if he liked me back. He didn't seem to fully understand how it all happened. He said he would ask me out on a date. And I'm going on a date with him this weekend. It seems that only Itachi has everything human. Mikoto smiled, rocking the child in her arms and watching him sleepily rub his eyes. What was that hint at just now? Sasuke narrowed his eyes, and his mother smiled mysteriously, stroking the baby's thin eyebrow with her thumb. You know, you and Madara look very similar, although Menma is just the spitting image of you as a little boy, she laughed quietly. We've already sorted that out, he waved it off. The child is definitely Madara's. But the uncle himself remembered the morning conversation with Hashirama. Doubt crept into his already heavy head again. Shursui couldn't come, he got an urgent call, so Itachi took care of Menma alone all weekend. Well, not exactly alone, Sasuke was home too, he just wasn't hanging around the kid like he usually did. He fed him, put him to bed, and then let the older man figure it out. Madara was nervous, and after the date he simply locked himself in his room, not responding to any attempts to somehow find out what exactly happened. Madara, frankly speaking, had no idea where they would go. Or rather, he imagined a restaurant with a secluded table where they could have a delicious dinner, drink wine, and talk without prying eyes and ears. But a couple of hours before the appointed time, he received a text message with a rather dubious content, dress inconspicuously. The Uchiha glanced at the prepared suit and sighed irritably. Inconspicuously? How so? Sasuke, he knocked and opened the door a crack, deciding to ask his gloomy nephew about fashion trends. He didn't have time to ask the question, seeing Sasuke with huge bruises under his eyes, chewing on a pencil as if it were someone's neck. Gray sweatpants and a dark blue sweatshirt. Yeah. Probably, that fit the description of inconspicuous. Returning to his own wardrobe, Madara pulled out black jeans and dug out a black leather jacket, quite rightly believing that dark colors would make him blend in with the crowd. Having dressed, he grinned at his reflection and winked seductively, pushing his hair back with his hand. Are you going to the informal gathering? Itachi asked. Menma looked at the older Uchiha with a strange expression. It's an inconspicuous species, you don't understand anything, he snorted. Your ass is so tight that it sparkles from 2 kilometers away, and on your jacket, is that a skull made of sequins? Itachi responded skeptically and shook his head. Menma grunted in agreement and jerked his hand, indicating that it would be better to take off this bad taste. Okay, fine. Then how do I become invisible? Open Sasuke's closet and take out the first things you come across. Anyway, 2 hours later, Madara was standing outside his own house in shabby sneakers, baggy sweatpants, and a dark gray sweatshirt that was 3 sizes too big and reached his hips. He had pulled his hair back into a ponytail and put on a cap, adding dark glasses to the look. So far, no one had stopped to ask for an autograph. Only an old woman had walked around him, calling him a damn drug addict. I wondered if Sasuke always got comments like that. No wonder he rarely left the house. A homeless-looking man stopped next to him and leaned his shoulder against the building's cladding. "Are you ready?" Madara flinched at the familiar voice and pulled his glasses down his nose. "Hashirama? Even in these clothes you still look stunning," Senju said instead of answering. "Why did we dress up like that?" Uchiha sighed and put his glasses back on. "You'll see everything," the man laughed, grabbed his hand and pulled him along. It wasn't like an evening at a restaurant at all. Instead of fine dining at an expensive establishment, they ran into McDonald's and ate in the parking lot. Another joke by Hashirama made Madara vomit cola, causing the idiot to burst into uncontrollable laughter, but no one dared approach them. You never know what these tramps could do. Then Senju took him to the subway. The subway. It must have been some kind of cunning plan, because they had to squeeze close to each other in the crush. They arrived at the very edge of the city, and Hashirama led him into some suspicious thickets, through which there was a path leading to a long staircase up the mountain. They walked in silence, and halfway through, the Uchiha even began to puff, but he was not going to give up and stop to rest. When they reached the top, he sighed in relief and bent over, resting his hands on his knees, and Hashirama stepped forward, patiently waiting for him to catch his breath. "Why do we?" Madara did not finish and opened his mouth. From the mountain there was a view of the entire city, shimmering with lights. He could not look away, clutching Hashirama's hand, and what he saw took his breath away, and he did not even notice how their fingers intertwined. It felt good to stand there silently, looking at something amazing and feeling free. There was an absolutely amazing feeling inside, something Uchiha had experienced before, but he had never understood what it was about. He looked at the lips stretched into a smile and remembered how the damn idiot had kissed him on the set. The difference in their heights seemed noticeable now, and it was hard to believe that he was next to an Omega again. But damn, if it really was like that, Madara would believe in fate. "I want to know what you smell like," he said. Senju narrowed his eyes slightly, still looking at the city, and nodded. "In a couple of weeks I'll just have to take a break from taking suppressants." "Do I have to wait that long?" Madara chuckled. What if he was disgusted by the Omega's scent? What if they weren't meant to be together at all, and all their crossing paths over the years was just an accident? "I waited 10 years, Hashirama stood facing the Uchiha and smiled. "What? You? When you pay attention to me?" Ever since we met on the set of that stupid commercial, he remembered how inexperienced and funny they both were, but even then Madara had amazed him with his fire. Uchiha blinked in surprise. He remembered that Senju had always been his rival, but how it all started had completely slipped his mind. Love at first sight? He laughed, but his laughter gradually died down, because Hashirama looked quite serious. "Really? Please don't laugh at my feelings. Are you serious? You were in love with me for 10 years? Madara swallowed hard. "Why? What do you mean, why?" He laughed quietly and placed his broad palm on the Uchiha's cheek. "How could I order myself to stop loving you?" The brunette had long since taken off his glasses and now nothing hid the confusion in his eyes. He had absolutely no idea how to react to such a statement, but Hashirama looked incredibly open and vulnerable, and his heart ached strangely. So it was fate after all? Taking a deep breath, as if he was about to dive, Uchiha leaned forward and finally did what he had wanted since they had first appeared on this mountain. Senju kissed him back softly, leaning down slightly so that Madara wouldn't have to stand on tiptoe, and wrapped his arms around the thin figure. It was past midnight when Uchiha got home and locked himself in his room, listening to his own racing heartbeat. He rummaged under his bed and pulled out a huge box containing his darkest secrets. Magazine clippings of Hashirama's interviews, his photos, posters, even a few figurines he had stolen from studios. Madara sat down heavily on the floor and ran his fingers through his hair. Was his abnormal obsession with his rival a crush all along? Another week flew by rather quickly. Menma, apparently, decided to make life easier for everyone and was not particularly capricious. There was no more fever, and his smile was flaunted by the first tooth that had not yet fully emerged. The three men had adapted so well to their new duties that they were doing many things automatically. In short, they had become very attached to the child, and he to them. Makoto readily answered questions and came a couple of times to babysit. A real family idol. If it weren't for one but. Madara didn't keep a diary, but he maniacally wrote down everything that had to do with Hashirama, following the principle of know your enemies better than yourself, or because of something else, as he found out. And the entries were dated. Indeed, at the time when Menma could have been conceived, he was busy filming with Senju, which means he wasn't sleeping with anyone. Itachi was already in a relationship with Shursui, and women weren't attractive to him. That left Sasuke, who had a strict rule, to sleep only with betas, just to avoid accidentally making children. It turned out that Menma wasn't related to them at all, he just looked similar. Only when he rocked the baby in his arms, Madara realized that the resemblance was truly familial. Even Makoto admitted it. He didn't want to think about it at all. Menma was their child, period. Maybe it's time to settle down? To accept Menma as my son, to finally start a normal relationship? Upon closer inspection, Hashirama turned out to be not so annoying. I even wanted to know the real smell of an omega. Speaking of smell. He looked thoughtfully at his sleeping nephew, who had taken up the entire couch. If Madara had mistaken Hashirama for an alpha, simply because he couldn't smell him, could. The Uchiha glanced at the sleeping child's face, and then back at his nephew. Yes, the resemblance was too strong. Sasuke had probably stumbled upon some omega posing as a beta. No other way. How great it was 10 years ago, when there were no such drugs. Everyone walked around with their own smells. Fights between maddened alphas because of a strange omega's sudden heat on the street. Nightmares in schools and colleges because of hormonally unstable teenagers. Well, maybe these drugs weren't so terrible. He carefully lowered the small body into the cradle. What difference did it make who the parent was? The three of them were taking care of Menma anyway. And Sasuke was still too young to become a father. In fact, Madara simply did not want to become a great uncle, too unsociable, rarely left his four walls, and did not even have friends. Well, what kind of father would he be? The Uchiha shook his head and grinned. He would not tell anyone anything. What's going on here? Sasuke held the grocery bags in his hands, looking at his roommates with suspicion. Menma was sitting on the couch, surrounded by pillows. Itachi was lying on the floor in a light wig and a curtain that was apparently supposed to be a dress, and Madara was reading a monologue with all his usual dramatic flair. We're introducing the child to art, Itachi responded phlegmatically. Apparently, he liked the role of the dead girl. Lie still and don't move. Great. You're fucking idiots. The youngest pulled a squeaky alphabet book out of the bag and threw it at Madara. Give him this, not your idiotic Hamlet. Ugh, he took the colorful thing with 2 fingers and winced. But Menma was very interested in the squeaking book. Oh no, how could you? Traitor. Maybe I should put the kettle on? It's lunchtime, came from the direction of the Ophelia again. Sasuke rolled his eyes and carried the bags into the kitchen, ignoring Madara's indignant mutterings about the baby's preferences. I need to go to the customer tomorrow, will anyone stay at home? Filming, shouted the uncle. I can then. Itachi nevertheless stood up and pulled off his wig. Why don't you take Menma with you? Madara grinned and walked into the kitchen with the child crumpling a squeaking book. What about you? Sasuke said in the same tone. I would take it, Itachi said quietly. No way. He'll look at your friends and then ruin his whole face with piercings. Madara exclaimed with genuine horror. Our beautiful boy can't see that. The brothers just sighed in unison. Will I come? Came the voice on the other end of the line. Shursui's voice was too cheerful for 8 in the morning. Itachi responded, not even understanding his lover's words. Vague agreement always worked with everyone in any situation. Okay, I'll be there in half an hour then, he exclaimed cheerfully and hung up. Uchiha put the phone down and dropped his head back onto the pillow. Menma stirred in the cradle and began to grunt, drawing attention to himself. Let's sleep a little longer? The man said pleadingly, but the child did not agree with him. Having managed to change the baby's diaper and feed him, Uchiha picked him up and almost jumped when he heard the doorbell ring. Itachi glanced at the mirror, noting the almost black circles under his eyes. his rather shabby appearance, and his unkempt hair. Sighing, he opened the door with his free hand and tried to smile, his other hand busy rocking Menma. Shursui raised his eyebrows and smiled, speaking in a whisper. Yours, or what? Very funny. Itachi stepped aside, letting the guest into the apartment. You told me about him, right? Can I? I love children. In our department there's a guy. He carefully picked up the baby in his arms and turned pale when bright blue eyes stared back at him. Itachi. Where did you get this child? I told you. They planted him. Madara, it seems, is his father. He finally allowed himself to take the comb, completely not noticing how his interlocutor tensed up in an instant. Menma didn't even cry, calmly looking at Shursui. That was strange. Your relative is the child's father? He took a deep breath and exhaled. Damn, they could have been following me. What? What are you talking about? Itachi gathered his hair into a ponytail, looking at Shursui in surprise. You don't even know what kind of bomb they planted on you, do you? He gave the child a tight smile, and the child yawned, feeling completely safe. What bomb? Speak normally. Uchiha touched the man's forehead just in case, checking his temperature. Let's sit down. Shursui hugged Menma tighter and walked over to the couch. Itachi followed him and sat down. Frowning. In our department, the man began to speak quietly. There is a guy. He specializes in undercover work. He infiltrates all sorts of dubious organizations and exposes the owners. Well, he crossed the path of a really big fish. Now there is such a hunt for him that it is scary just to think about it. Yeah. What does Menma have to do with it? Itachi narrowed his eyes, although he suspected what was coming next. Considering that on his last mission he got pregnant out of stupidity. The whole department came up with a name for the child. Shursui grinned. And Menma smiled with his toothless mouth, as if he knew that they were talking about him now. Itachi massaged the bridge of his nose, sighing heavily. Are you saying that this guy is being hunted, and he decided to keep the child safe not with one of his colleagues, but with us? A very logical decision. No one knows about you. Until now, I hope. Besides, it's always better for a child to be with at least one of the parents. Shursui chewed his lip, wondering what to do with this information now. Don't tell the others, let them act as if nothing happened. The child must be safe, and you can't vouch for your brother and uncle's reaction. Are you kidding me? What if those bad guys come after us? We can't even protect ourselves, let alone a child. Itachi leaned back on the couch and closed his eyes. He could do without these complications. The only weapon we have in the house is a kitchen knife. If Naruto relied on you, it means he knew you could handle it. Shursui smiled, watching the child fall asleep in his arms. Naruto, then. Who did he run into? Uchiha had already figured out how much a new alarm system for his apartment would cost him. Orochimaru. Well, you remember, there was a big case. He stole people and conducted horrible experiments on them under the guise of pharmaceutical production. Itachi fell silent and rubbed his face with his palms, sighing heavily. What's wrong? Shursui looked at him with concern. Nothing. It's just that half an hour ago I thought I had a little cousin. And now it turns out I'm an uncle. Shursui left in the evening, leaving Itachi with very clear instructions in case something happened. It was because of this that Uchiha had once refused to become a policeman. Fugaku, however, was not against it. As the chief of the city police, he knew what risks this job entailed, so Itachi got approval for law school quite easily. It seemed to be a fairly close field, but more paperwork than field work. And Sasuke had always been a rebel, but, fortunately, his protest graffiti on the walls had grown into a real profession. The parents could only agree. And now he was rocking the child in his arms, smiling from ear to ear. Madara chuckled next to him and narrowed his eyes. What? Why are you looking at me like that? Sasuke looked back at them and proudly walked away with Menma to the kitchen. And when did you realize that? Uncle folded his arms across his chest, shaking his head. Yes, Madara was no stranger to insight. Today. And you? A few days ago, the elder one said proudly, as if he had won some kind of bet. Just don't tell him anything. Itachi grabbed his brother's cell phone from the coffee table and unlocked the screen. He dug into the settings and checked the box next to share location. "And I didn't plan to," he chuckled and also headed to the kitchen. Itachi glanced around the living room. Baby clothes were scattered on the couch, blocks were scattered on the floor, and a stuffed fox's face was sticking out of a carrier. And all of this fit so organically into the lives of the three men. It was hard to imagine what would happen to them if something suddenly happened to Menma. Chapter 5 Sasuke sat down on a bench and took out his cell phone, holding the handle of the stroller with his free hand. Menma shook the rattle vigorously and chewed on it periodically, looking at the tree branches above him and the sky. The weather was wonderful, and the park was quite crowded. Joggers were running laps, couples were strolling with ice cream, some just came to sit on the benches to read or feed the pigeons. People with strollers threw each other knowing glances, sometimes striking up a conversation. Sasuke, of course, wasn't involved. He rocked the stroller, hoping Menma would fall asleep, and idly flipped through pictures of baby cribs. The carrier was certainly convenient, they could drag it from room to room, but the baby was growing, which meant it was time to buy something more substantial. "Sasuke-kun?" A familiar and not very pleasant voice rang out. Uchiha raised his head and raised an eyebrow. Even on such a warm day, Kabuto was wearing a long gray coat, as if he was hiding from prying eyes. He smiled falsely and adjusted his glasses. "What a surprise. Yours?" He nodded towards the stroller, still wearing a nasty smile. "Mine," Sasuke nodded. He didn't want to go into details and explain their interesting family situation to a stranger. "So cute." Yakushi looked into the stroller, and it seemed his smile became sincere. He even took out his mobile phone and took a photo of the child. "I adore children. And what is their name, if it's not a secret?" "Menma," he tried to answer in monosyllables, hoping that it would save him from unpleasant company. He didn't say anything in the photo. This man had many oddities, let him do what he wants and get out of here as soon as possible. "Menma? What a wonderful name." Kabuto laughed quietly and walked away from the stroller. "Where do you work now, Sasuke-kun? It's been so long." At home, Uchiha sighed and stood up, intending to literally walk away from this conversation. "Well, yes, it's convenient when you're taking care of a child. Menma's other parent is probably very busy? You can't even imagine how much." "He works day and night," Sasuke muttered through his teeth, already thinking about sending the annoying clerk to hell. "I have no doubt. So, all the responsibilities of upbringing are on you?" "It's hard." He shook his head, smiling, and before the Uchiha could send him away rudely, he glanced at his watch and waved his hand. "It was nice chatting, Sasuke-kun, but, there's a lot to do. See you later." "I hope not," Sasuke whispered to Kabuto as he walked away. Yakushi had always been devious and cunning. It was no wonder he was still free. But that could mean Orochimaru was acting through him, behind bars, and continuing his inhumane deeds. Shivering, the Uchiha moved on, wanting to quickly shake off the unpleasant feeling from the conversation. The house was cool and quiet. Madara was filming. Itachi was also at work. But Menma had no intention of sleeping. Having let him onto his own wide bed, Sasuke watched the child's first attempts to crawl. For the first time, the thought occurred to him that his uncle was something to envy. Even though the three of them were raising the baby, he was still born thanks to Madara. All his life, Uchiha had been disgusted by children. Noisy, snotty, drooling, disgusting creatures, that's what he considered them, which is why he only slept with betas. Even the thought of producing one of those creatures terrified him. And now Menma was crawling in front of him, loudly and inarticulately raving about the freedom of movement he was given, and Sasuke tried to swallow the lump in his throat. Was it possible to feel such tenderness for a child? How was it that a baby made him smile and want to hold a tiny, incapable body close to him? He was jealous and afraid. Jealous that Menma wasn't his child, and afraid that he wouldn't feel the same warmth for his own children, if he ever had any. And above all this, an angry thought beat: some bastard had just up and abandoned the baby. Almost a month had passed, and they still hadn't received any news from Menma's parent. If he knew the address, he could have at least sent a letter or something like that. Sasuke ran his hand through the child's hair, and the child smiled, proudly showing off the tooth and trying to crawl towards the adult. He picked the child up and sighed, looking into the huge blue eyes. How could your parent abandon you? What kind of monster is he that he dumped you on the doorstep of complete strangers? He stretched out on the bed and laid Menma on top of him. You know, when you grow up, you can find him and punch him in the nose, I allow it. The child only fumbled and slid off the man, putting his fingers in his mouth. This gesture was already extremely familiar. Yeah, I wouldn't mind some lunch either, Sasuke smiled and dragged him into the kitchen. Menma was banging a plastic spoon on the base of his high chair, making different pitched sounds. It was supposed to be laughter, Sasuke realized. He gritted his teeth, glaring at the child. The fruit puree slid out of his hair and splashed onto the floor. The child laughed again, smearing the rest of the puree across the base with his palm. He was covered from head to toe in what had once been an apple and a pear, and had also gotten the Uchiha into the mix. Amazing, Sasuke muttered. He picked up the child and headed for the bathroom. Throwing the dirty clothes into the washing machine, he stood under the warm stream of water with Menma and sighed. You really had to get dirty, didn't you? The child stretched his lips into a smile and leaned his head against the man's shoulder. Don't try to appease me. Uchiha also couldn't hold back his smile and ran his hand through the baby's dark hair, washing away the puree. Itachi was fiddling with his cell phone and glancing at his watch. There was very little time left until lunch, although their office wasn't particularly busy today anyway. He sighed and dialed his brother's number. No one answered. Sasuke probably just didn't hear. Putting the phone aside, Itachi twirled a pen in his hands and tried to read the document lying in front of him, but his gaze kept returning to the device. Shit, he muttered and dialed the number again. Only beeps. And again. And again. His hand began to shake, and everything inside him went cold. He checked Sasuke's location at home. But what if someone broke into their house? Shursui warned that he could be followed. Itachi dialed the number again. No one answered. He jumped up from his seat and ran towards the exit, under Nagato's surprised gaze. Sasuke wrapped himself in a towel and wrapped the same around the child. Menma was already sleepily rubbing his eyes, languid from the warm water and the measured rocking. So Uchiha put the little pest to bed with a clear conscience and went to clean the kitchen, which then turned into a large-scale cleaning. He had already managed to put away the mop and bucket and change his clothes when the front door opened with a bang and Itachi burst into the apartment, breathing heavily. What's wrong? Sasuke blinked and pursed his lips in irritation when he heard a child crying from the room. Why aren't you picking up the phone? Itachi barked and immediately exhaled, calming down. Rubbing the bridge of his nose, he carefully closed the door behind him. Psycho, the younger one raised an eyebrow and went to calm Menma down, grabbing his cell phone from the table. 5 missed calls? A record. Sasuke, please answer the phone. He followed him, feeling incredibly relieved that everything was okay with his brother and the child. Are you that nervous? Did you read about the burglar killers in your office again? Sasuke chuckled. We were just in the shower. Itachi shook his head and smiled. His life was going to be a real nightmare. You really should have ordered a crib from fucking IKEA, right? Madara hissed, twirling the instructions in his hands. Cheap and good quality, Sasuke shrugged, taking the parts out of the box. Everything here is in Swedish. How are we going to assemble this? The pictures are not in Swedish, Itachi noted quite rightly. They spent another half-hour quietly arguing, trying to understand the instructions, and then finally got down to assembling it. Maybe you and Menma should go to a country house? Nature, fresh air, it's good for the child. Mom will help you there, Itachi said thoughtfully, turning to his brother. Don't you want to send me somewhere? Uncle grinned. Doesn't Shursui have his own apartment? Sasuke raised an eyebrow. What does he have to do with it? Oh, we all understand, Itachi. Madara laughed quietly and winked at him. Something happened to him at home, he needs somewhere to stay, and you don't want the child to hear your sweet moans. I'm going to puke, Sasuke grimaced. Did you have to say that out loud? Actually, I just thought it was an interesting idea, Itachi rubbed his reddened cheek and shook his head. I mean the cottage. Yes, justify yourself now. I'm not going anywhere, Sasuke said categorically. Have sex in a motel like all normal people. Sasuke. Madara shouted, covering the ears of the child who was sitting next to him and watching with interest the assembly of his future sleeping place. Itachi sighed heavily. The plan to hide the treasure had failed. Did you take my keys? Sasuke held the phone to his ear, looking at the already fully dressed child in the stroller and standing in one sneaker. Yes, I accidentally grabbed it, sorry, Itachi lied, checking both bundles in his pocket. I can't go for a walk with Menma now. He took off his sneaker and exhaled in irritation. He had spent so much time putting clothes on the resisting child, and all in vain. I'll take him for a walk myself in the evening, his older brother assured him and hung up. The plan was good, but he couldn't keep Sasuke and Menma locked up forever. Shursui promised to let him know if he had any leads on the pursuers, but the phone was dead. It was hard to imagine what was going on in their precinct, and in particular with this Naruto. Even though they didn't know each other, Itachi was worried about this man as if he were a family member. And considering how attached he was to Menma, Uzumaki was a family member. Nagato, he turned to his colleague, who looked up from his reading. Do you still have connections with those strange guys? A hacker and a cultist? Nagato smiled. Yes. I need help with a little matter. Nothing illegal, just finding out a few things. Itachi rubbed his neck tiredly. It might even be good for them. The red-haired man nodded and rummaged through a drawer, from which he pulled out a black notebook with a pattern of red clouds. Opening it to the right page, he handed the book to his colleague. Thank you. Don't thank me in advance. They still need some convincing. Madara did not notice any strange behavior in his brothers. He was too preoccupied with the events of his personal life and caring for the child in the evenings. The more time he spent with Hashirama, the more he felt like a teenager in love. It even got to the point where he himself began to squeeze Senju in the dark corners of the set. Well, how squeeze? He was the initiator, but the Omega was stronger and bigger, so it usually ended with Madara pressed against the wall and hanging on Hashirama, clasping him with all his limbs. What was strange was the light-hearted, celebratory mood that reigned there. Mito seemed to have even brought champagne to celebrate the event called These Idiots Finally Got It. In short, everything was going very smoothly, and Madara was in his own little bubble of happiness, ignoring his older nephew's unusual twitchiness. By the end of the week, Itachi was seriously considering telling his brother the truth, but he was afraid of the reaction. It would be logical to tell his father first and then talk to Sasuke, but Itachi didn't have much hope for his brother's prudence. He was always impulsive. And he really didn't know what to do. If he told everything, his brother would probably start digging the earth with his horn and try to personally sort everything out instead of calmly leaving the city with the child while the police dealt with the pursuers. Although the matter concerned Orochimaru, this almost guaranteed the impotence of the law. That's why he had to use the phones that Nagato kindly provided. Kakuzu turned out to be a very accommodating person. Especially when it came to payment for his services. Haydn was indignant for a long time, but also agreed. It seemed that his god did not forbid him from spying on people and carrying cold weapons. Well, that only played into Itachi's hands. We're going for a walk. Sasuke put Menma in the stroller and reached for his jacket. Should we buy something on the way back? The milk is gone. And the diapers are running low, Itachi responded, tapping his fingers on the edge of his mobile phone, waiting for at least some news. Don't be late, okay? We need to talk. Okay, the younger one waved his hand and left the apartment. The evening was rather cool, but that didn't make the streets any less crowded. The setting sun still illuminated the park beautifully, and Sasuke strolled leisurely along the wide paths. Itachi's nervousness was bothering him, but then again, his older brother had always been more meticulous. He was probably thinking up something and now he wanted to mess with the minds of others. Uchiha grinned and shrugged. The sticky feeling between his shoulder blades wouldn't go away, and he turned around, looking around the park. An elderly couple was sitting on a bench, quietly talking. The runner stopped, clicking something on his player. A couple was walking slowly along the next path. Nothing unusual. He probably just caught Itachi's excitement, that's all. Although Menma was also acting capricious, tossing and turning in the stroller and whining. When it started to get dark, Sasuke headed to the supermarket. Adequate people don't go shopping at this time, so Uchiha entered the half-empty hall with relief. He lazily moved along the long rows, quickly glancing at the products. Again, an unpleasant feeling surfaced inside, but there was no one behind him. What the hell, he muttered and took some baby formula from the shelf. As soon as he went to the dairy section, a man in a supermarket uniform walked towards him, smiling widely. Sasuke stopped and frowned, expecting some ridiculous proposal. His expectations were not met. Instead of a message about pointless promotions, Uchiha received a rag with sleeping pills in his face. Chapter 6 Naruto leafed through the folder and nodded. They had been hunting Orochimaru for a long time, but the snake was able to dodge well enough to escape justice and still present himself as an honest citizen. Your name is Hiroki Ryu, you know your mission. And don't forget to take the suppressants, no one should know your scent. Kakashi tiredly scratched his cheek. I won't forget, Uzumaki grinned, putting the folder in his backpack. But I have no idea what they do in the financial department. If any complications arise, call Shikamaru, but keep it quiet, we barely got you into this position. He got up from the table and headed towards the door with the blonde to pour himself some coffee. Okay, I'll go, because tomorrow I have to go to work, I want to get ready. Naruto smiled and rushed through the area. Almost everyone knew whose lair he was going to, so they followed his back with sympathetic glances. Our little fox will definitely expose Orochimaru, Shursui grinned. I have no doubt. But what will happen to him later? The snake has plenty of connections in the criminal world, and Naruto won't sit within four walls. Kakashi sighed and shook his head, washing down a sedative with tasteless coffee. The boy doesn't take care of himself. Naruto assessed the scale. The office building was one of the most expensive in the city, and it also had several laboratories. Orochimaru seemed to smirk in their faces and say, look, I do everything openly, and you can't do anything about it. The blonde hissed in displeasure and went inside. Finally stumbling upon the financial department, he went inside and smiled broadly, getting ready to meet his colleagues. No one even raised their heads from their computers, although it was not yet working hours. He shuddered at such a cold reception and walked over to the empty chair, which now apparently belonged to him. The location of the desk was quite convenient, no one could see the computer screen except him, which meant he could rummage through the shared folders as much as he wanted. Uzumaki figured that it would be good to make friends with the system administrator and get access to everything. He immediately mentally dismissed Orochimaru's main assistant. Kabuto was even more slippery than his boss. At lunch it was worth going through other departments and looking for the most accommodating ones. Only there was still plenty of time before the break, so Naruto opened the instructions from Shikamaru and grimaced, damn Excel. Well, the time before lunch passed quite quickly, and Naruto rushed out of the office after the rest of the hungry workers. He was not allowed into the labs, the other departments were filled with the same silent people who did not even communicate with each other, and he did not find the system admin at all. Things were getting more complicated, but Naruto did not despair. It was only the first day. On some missions he spent several months to dig up serious materials. Watch where you're going, someone snapped, pushing Uzumaki with their shoulder. Hey! You could be more polite, actually, the blonde shouted at him, clenching his fists. Is everyone here crazy? Yes, I can. But I won't go with you. The tall, pale-faced brunette showed him the middle finger and moved on, and Naruto was even taken aback by such impudence. Great. The first day, and everyone here is already pissing him off. He will definitely shut down this dirty office. 2 weeks. For 2 weeks he tried this way and that to find out something, but everything was so useless that Naruto was thinking about trampling his own pride and forcing himself as a lover on Orochimaru himself. They said that he liked young naive boys. But Uzumaki put this idea off until the very last resort. He was walking down the corridor, looking at the pattern on the carpet, and ran into someone with all his might. You again? Open your eyes, the familiar brunette said discontentedly. Uchiha Sasuke, as Naruto had managed to find out. A young specialist who came here by invitation from the snake. Maybe he knew something. It was worth trying. Sorry, I'm just new, and everyone here is so weird, it really throws me off track. He awkwardly rubbed his neck and looked down at the floor. Weird? Sasuke snorted, raising an eyebrow and looking the blonde over with an appraising glance. A lost look, a rather wide gray suit, too bright appearance, although he tried to blend in with the rest of the office plankton. Clearly did not fit in. Good, the Uchiha was interested. No one talks about anything except work. He kept silent about the fact that no one talks about work either. Like some kind of robots. I thought it would be interesting to work for Orochimaru. All sorts of developments. But it turned out, not so much. Sasuke narrowed his eyes, smirking. He was also lazing around and, it seemed, was only needed here so that the snake could feel him up with a sticky look, make a few compliments and then go back. Well, the salary for that was quite good. Hey, want to have lunch together? Naruto smiled widely, looking openly into the dark eyes of his interlocutor. Well, please, behave. Okay, but you pay. You went a bit overboard with the lube, Sasuke chuckled, holding the guy moving on him by the waist. Well, you know, better too much than not enough, Naruto smiled. The excuse was weak, but it seemed to work. In fact, he had no idea that their acquaintance and joint dinners would turn into this. Naruto did not want to admit to himself that he had fallen in love, because it would have entailed a lot of consequences. Firstly, he knew perfectly well that Sasuke was just sleeping with him. It was stupid to count on a relationship. Secondly, Sasuke was sleeping with Hiroki Ryu, not with Uzumaki Naruto. Thirdly, Naruto would disappear from his life as soon as Orochimaru was finished. None of them needed his stupid crush, so he kept all these stupid feelings to himself. Uchiha had told him a lot about Orochimaru, and the search for the background went much faster when Uzumaki began to steal all sorts of goodies from Suigetsu. And then he met Karen from the labs on a tip from Sasuke. And he felt that the matter would soon end in his favor. There was just a little bit left, and they would never meet again. I'm constantly surprised that a financier has such a body. Uchiha ran his palm down his sculpted torso to squeeze his hand on his cock. I go to the gym, well, that was partly true. Naruto began to move faster, closing his eyes in pleasure. He would have to remember to take a pill later, otherwise the suppressants would have messed everything up for him. And considering that this was the first time Sasuke had complained about excess moisture, this was the beginning of his heat. He leaned over and greedily inhaled the Uchiha scent, almost groaning from it. Yes, definitely a heat. He didn't remember about the pill after he sent Sasuke out of the apartment and took a shower. Kakashi called and started reporting the good news that they had found Orochimaru's offshore accounts and evidence of illegal activity thanks to the information Naruto had obtained. A couple more weeks and that would be it. He was so happy about the imminent end of the difficult case that everything else simply flew out of his head. Sasuke quit before the office was raided, which Naruto was quite pleased about. Something terrible was happening in the labs, but no one from the company, except for those directly responsible, was under investigation. Then there was a trial, but Uzumaki no longer took part in it. But every day his body became weaker, somehow unfamiliar, and when nausea began in the mornings, it finally dawned on him how badly he was in trouble. 3 tests and an ultrasound readily confirmed his guess. Kakashi screamed so loudly that everyone in the precinct quickly realized what kind of present Naruto had returned with from this mission. However, Uzumaki did not stop working, only now he was busy with paperwork, and everyone around him was feeding him and trying to make life easier for the stubborn Omega. The whole department came up with a name for the newborn. As a result, Menma became not only Naruto's child, but also the child of the entire precinct. And Sasuke's phone still answered with a monotonous "subscriber is not in service." No, Uzumaki, of course, had found out his address long ago, even stood at the threshold a couple of times, but he still did not dare to press the doorbell. If Uchiha did not call him, then it was just a small adventure for 2, nothing more. Why drag him into something he did not want? Naruto himself was to blame for what happened, now he himself would have to clean up. Besides, he would have to tell a lot. Naruto alone could easily deal with this, but it was too difficult to share it between 2. The first months passed pretty well. At the station, someone even thought of putting up a crib for Menma. And then Naruto found out that he was being hunted, although Kakashi had warned him, but Uzumaki, as always, hoped for the best. It all started with simple surveillance. Naruto always sensed when he was being watched. He tried to lead his pursuers into a trap several times, but Orochimaru's men were obviously not stupid. The first attempt looked like a simple robbery. And Naruto would have thought so if they hadn't known his name. Luckily, Menma was with Kakashi, and nothing stopped him from escaping without a scratch. No matter how brave he was, fighting 7 armed men alone would have been a disastrous decision. Then everything calmed down a bit, and Uzumaki felt that it was not just like that. There is always a calm before the storm. And so it happened. He managed to change several apartments, but the current address still ended up in the hands of his pursuers. The shot scared the kid a lot. The whole apartment was upside down, because Uzumaki tried to fight off the attackers, protect Menma, and put something on the wound in his shoulder. He managed to knock out and tie up 3 bastards and called Kakashi. Now the main thing remained. Having bandaged the shoulder, he lined the carrier with fresh linen, somehow calmed the child down and scribbled a short letter in a quick, sweeping handwriting. He pressed the doorbell twice and looked at the sleeping baby, breathing heavily. The sleeves of his shirt and jacket were already soaked with blood. Naruto smiled sadly and disappeared behind the staircase door. A man appeared on the threshold, Sasuke's brother, which Uzumaki had already found out long ago. After reading the note, he picked up the carrier and carried it into the house. Only then did Naruto breathe a sigh of relief and take out his phone. Dialing an ambulance. If only he didn't roll down the stairs, otherwise his head was already spinning from the loss of blood. During these weeks the wound had managed to heal, but the pursuers had not gone anywhere, and Uzumaki only hoped that they would not find the child. He lived in constant expectation of the worst, but he could not find the criminals. So when an envelope with several photos of Menma arrived at Kakashi's station, Naruto felt like the ground had been pulled out from under his feet. He didn't want to listen to any plans. If he got caught, so be it. They needed him, not a child. Itachi glanced at his watch and hissed discontentedly. It was no longer a good time to walk, and Sasuke was in no hurry to get home. He grabbed his cell phone and decided to check his brother's location first. Rather than call him, Sasuke had made it clear what he thought of his brother's overprotectiveness. What the? Itachi breathed out and felt his heart pounding loudly against his ribs. The icon was moving across the map too quickly and clearly not in the direction of home. Having calmed down the approaching panic, he dialed Shirsui's number. "We have problems," came the voice on the other end of the line instead of a greeting. Of course. Sasuke opened his eyes with difficulty. His eyelids didn't want to open, and his head was buzzing, giving off an unpleasant heaviness, as if he had been drinking all evening yesterday. It was cold and wet. With these sensations came awareness. Water was pouring down his hair, face, running down his neck, and his wet clothes were sticking unpleasantly to his body. Then a child's cry reached his ears, and everything inside him stirred. "Menma," he whispered hoarsely. "Finally woke up?" This was the last voice Sasuke wanted to hear right now. Calm him down. Something alive, warm and screaming fell into his hands, and Sasuke mechanically began to rock the child. His head completely refused to work and understand what was happening. "Maybe we should just shoot them and be done with it?" The voice was unfamiliar, and Uchiha tried to make out its owner, but in the dim light of the room he could only make out a massive dark figure. "Then we'll lose both our trump cards. Better go check the security, the boy will be here any minute," Kabuto said. The heavy metal door creaked, and a dark figure came out. Menma grabbed onto Sasuke's wet clothes and began to calm down, feeling his familiar warmth and rhythmic rocking. The Uchiha tried to focus his gaze on him, but his eyes kept closing. "Sasuke-kun, don't sleep." Kabuto threw away the empty water bottle and slapped the man on the cheek. This invigorated him, and the Uchiha jerked. His hands were occupied with the child, but his legs were tightly tied almost to the knees. Apparently, the room was abandoned. Everything around was covered in a layer of dust and concrete chips, and every step Kabuto took was echoed by the squeak of his soles on this mixture. "Orochimaru-sama took a liking to you, Sasuke-kun, and you repaid him like this. You had to get involved with this Uzumaki. Kabuto shook his head, chuckling. What other Uzumaki? Uchiha hissed, hugging the child tightly and finally coming to his senses. What's the point of pretending to know nothing? We already have you and Menma. He looked at Sasuke with feigned sympathy and blinked, noticing the stranger's expression. Wait, you really don't know anything? What about that conversation in the park? Oh, this is getting funnier. Kabuto burst out laughing and doubled over, and Uchiha really regretted that he couldn't beat the bastard's lungs into bloody foam right now. Oh, Sasuke-kun, okay, I'll tell you. The man you know as Hiroki Ryu is actually Uzumaki Naruto. A policeman, I admit, one of the best. And the parent of the child you're holding in your arms. Yakushi took off his glasses and wiped them with a handkerchief, still smiling broadly. There was information that the child was abandoned to you, but I didn't believe it. And that's how it is, it turns out. Sasuke wasn't listening to him anymore, staring at Menma. Well, of course. Those eyes. He had guessed. After all. Naruto Uzumaki, then. And you. He closed his eyes and exhaled convulsively. So he was holding his own son in his arms? The realization twisted painfully in the solar plexus, and a viscous lump of panic rose in his throat, which he had not allowed to take hold of him before. Everything was falling into place. And how carefully this financier found out everything about Orochimaru and company, how he tried to befriend everyone, even how the old snake was caught, became clear. Only one thing was strange, the child he was now holding in his arms. Menma did not fit into the picture at all, but he was clearly the main trump card in the fight for Orochimaru's freedom. So what do you want? Sasuke raised his head and stared at Kabuto with a withering gaze. From you? To keep quiet and not let the child scream, otherwise I'll have to shut him up. Yakushi pulled back the edge of his coat, revealing a holster with a gun. We need to wait for the main character of this epic. I'm sure you'll be happy to meet Naruto again. A kind of family reunion. Isn't it cute? The door creaked unpleasantly, and someone's head poked through the opening. Sir, all cameras on the premises are disabled, and someone has disabled the perimeter security. What do you mean disconnected? Then connect them again. Kabuto frowned and touched the gun. We can't, they've been hacked, the stranger said bashfully. We told him clearly to be alone, otherwise the child will suffer, Yakushi said through clenched teeth. Well, that's his problem. Who the hell are you? Naruto was breathing heavily, having knocked another guard down. Help, the guy with lilac hair, the color of which had clearly washed out and become almost dirty gray, played with a knife in his hand and smiled maniacally. If they find out that someone is helping me. Oh, fuck, stop whining, Haiden grimaced and slipped inside the warehouse. Kakuzu should have already turned off the cameras, which meant it was safe to act openly. I'll have some fun here, and you go find the kid. Uzumaki frowned and nodded, heading further down the hallway. There was no time to even think about where this strange man who knew about the child came from and why he was helping. He quietly made his way past the rusted doors behind which God knows what was stored, listening for voices, hoping to hear Kabuto or Menma scream. It was quiet, and he was already despairing, and time was passing. Having made another turn, he nervously clutched the pistol in his hand and listened again. His instinct, almost animal-like, which had saved his life more than once, did not fail him this time. Only his reaction failed him. He jerked, trying to jump back and turn around at the same time, but the butt of the heavy rifle reached the back of his head first. Sasuke hugged the kid tighter, looking into Kabuto's eyes. Damn, why didn't he have any superpowers like eyes that could fry people's brains or something? Well, I think there is no point in harming the child or you now. Let's wait until Naruto shows up, and then I will clearly demonstrate to him why he should listen to me. Yakushi grinned and turned to the creak of the door. We have a fox. Chapter 7 Hatake Kakashi always admired his mentor. He went to the police academy simply because he didn't know what else to do with his life, and after graduating, he immediately came under the supervision of Minato Namikaze. Fair without being harsh, kind enough but knowing when to put people in their place. Minato seemed like the best at what he did, and he was. He devoted himself to his work, especially after his wife died. His methods were always efficient but humane, a balance rare among seasoned police officers. And Kakashi learned everything from this man, but with good policemen, especially those in high positions, a bad thing often happens: death. However, Minato left in this world not only many students who picked up his methods of work, but also a young son. No one could understand how a man who had a small child could continue to risk himself for the safety of others. It seemed senseless and strange. But as Hatake realized many years later, it was simply a character trait, passed down through the family, apparently. Kakashi knew very well what it was like to be an orphan, and he knew very well what it was like to grow up in an orphanage. So without a second thought, he took custody of the boy and raised him as his own son. And with such a heredity, where else could Naruto go? His talents clearly came from his biological father, and his grip came from his adoptive father. The boy knew from childhood what he wanted to become, and spent his free time at the police station. Hatake hated himself for this, but he began to use the child's talents even then. Even criminals were taken in by the blue-eyed naive miracle, who tearfully begged them for something. And how many pedophiles they caught at that time, you can't count. And Uzumaki, namely, the child's mother's surname, was written by Kakashi on the form once, so that the boy would not be hunted by those who were thirsty for revenge. Even for the dead, Minato liked to do this work, to cleanse the city of crime. Only Kakashi poured liters of sedatives into himself every time. He knew that only Naruto would be able to get to Orochimaru, and there was no decision in his life harder than this. And then Uzumaki came to him pale and silently handed over a test with 2 stripes. Kakashi didn't try to persuade Naruto to have an abortion out of purely selfish motives. He thought that a child would make the boy less reckless, make him settle down and stop going out into the field. Well, yes, of course. Both Minato and Naruto. Both thought about the well-being of other people more than about their own family. And now he stood in front of the abandoned building that once belonged to the Orochimaru Corporation, clutching a gun in his hand and praying that Uzumaki and the child were alive. He never asked how Shisui had found out the exact location of the hostages, but there wasn't much time for that. When they arrived at the place, there were already mercenaries tied up around the building, and something told him that it wasn't Naruto who did it. They weren't in a hurry to get into the building itself, afraid to ruin everything. Sasuke rocked Menma soothingly in his arms under Kabuto's mocking gaze. So cute, I could just die. He adjusted his glasses, grinning. Well then, do me a favor and die, Uchiha snapped. Now, Sasuke-kun, you're in no position to say such things, Kabuto smiled falsely. The metal door creaked as it opened, and Sasuke held his breath. A blond man, his face already visibly stained with blood, was pushed inside. He lost his footing and fell face down on the concrete floor. The Uchiha frowned, looking at the familiar shock of blonde hair. Menma, say hello to daddy, the bespectacled man said in a sickeningly sweet voice and kicked the blonde in the ribs. Why don't you stand up and greet us, Naruto-kun? How impolite. Sasuke carefully turned the child away from the unfolding picture, swallowing hard himself and roughly imagining what the sadist could do. Let them go, a hoarse voice said, and Uzumaki spat out blood, sitting down on his knees. His hands were tightly bound, and he could no longer feel his wrists. Ignoring Kabuto, he stared at the Uchiha and the child, and Sasuke could clearly see the fear in his eyes. His own helplessness made him angry, but for Menma's sake he didn't even twitch once more. No, that won't do. You brought someone with you, and that's not what we agreed on, Kabuto smiled and pulled his gun out of his holster. Choose who? The child or Sasuke-kun? Put your weapon away, otherwise there will be no talk of any negotiations. Naruto tried to keep his tone threatening, although his heart was pounding loudly against his ribs, and the sickening fear was twisting his stomach even more. Menma stirred in Sasuke's arms, hearing the familiar voice, but the Uchiha still held him to his chest and did not let him turn. Are you going to demand something else? Yakushi smiled and pulled the trigger. The bullet flew past Sasuke's head and left a hole in the wall behind him. Menma started crying again, and Uchiha immediately began to calm him down. He had just almost lost his life, but he wasn't afraid. He just wanted to untie his legs and beat Kabuto until every bone in the bastard's body was broken. But Naruto looked strangely calm. Only after looking into his blue eyes did Sasuke swallow hard. Hayden heard the shot and turned around. So, it seemed he had failed his mission. He could deal with armed mercenaries, but thanks to his unexpected appearance. And in the direction of the shot, something was probably happening that the element of surprise could not be applied to. He would have to call for backup. He pulled his cell phone out of his pocket and dialed Kakuzu. "Get out of there," immediately sounded on the other end of the line. "Why is that?" "I just started enjoying myself. There's police all around the perimeter. If you get caught, I'll tell Nagato not to bail you out." "You're such a jerk," Hayden sighed. Well, it seemed he really should have run. But he was used to completing his tasks to the end. Throwing the phone back, he ran to where the shot came from. The guards were at the door, and Hayden cursed under his breath as he ducked. Okay, maybe Kakuzu was right. But at least now he could tell the police exactly where to go. "The conditions are very simple, Naruto-kun. You make sure that Orochimaru-sama is freed, we return the child to you. And Sasuke-kun, maybe," Kabuto smiled broadly, completely not noticing how Uzumaki had become quiet. "You're lying," Sasuke interjected. "Orochimaru would never refuse such a tool as someone else's child." "Who knows?" The smile slipped a little from Yakushi's face, and the gun was now aimed right at the Uchiha's forehead. Silence hung heavy in the air as they all listened to the distant noise that was getting closer. The building echoed with shouts and the tramp of heavy boots in the hallways. Kabuto narrowed his eyes unpleasantly and hissed, almost like Orochimaru. "You brought a whole squad of police, you little bastard. I warned you." He took the gun off safety and began to bend his finger on the trigger. Sasuke leaned down sharply, hugging the child to his chest and protecting him, but the shot did not sound. The gun rolled across the floor with a roar, and Naruto squeezed the throat of Kabuto, who was writhing and wheezing on the floor, with his knee. The blonde's gaze was terrible, and he himself pressed his foot harder. Probably, if the door hadn't opened with a bang, he would have finally strangled the vile bespectacled man, but Kakashi pulled him away in time, not allowing him to do something irreparable. Everything that followed was chaotic. Sasuke remembered being taken out with the child and taken to the ambulance. The doctor was telling him something about shock, offering to take him to the hospital, but Uchiha ignored him, still holding Menma. The child was whining, but not screaming, feeling somewhat safe. The police were rounding up the mercenaries and taking them away. He saw Kabuto screaming, his hands in handcuffs twitching, but he couldn't find the blonde head in all this madness. Itachi broke through the mass of similar uniformed figures and grabbed his brother. "Everything okay?" He took his pale face in his hands and looked into his brother's eyes. Sasuke grinned and tried to nod. Nothing was okay. He had so many questions that his head was buzzing, and no one was in a hurry to give answers. "We can go home. Tomorrow we'll just go to the station and give a statement," I agreed. "Or Shursui can come by himself." Itachi led him to the car, but Sasuke was still looking around in the hope of seeing the one who caused all this. Sasuke didn't want to open his eyes at all. He knew that the child, his own son, was safe with Itachi and Madara. He had been lying in the same position since he woke up an hour ago, remembering everything that had happened in detail. Accepting the fact that he had become a father was easy, but everything else. No, he understood everything, put it all into perspective, but the aftertaste was still there. All this time, he hadn't even known that he had a child. From a person he didn't know at all, as it turned out. "Sasuke?" Itachi knocked on the door a couple of times and stuck his head in. "They came to see you, that's important." "How important is it?" He finally opened his eyes and raised himself up. "Menma is being taken away." Sasuke jumped out of bed, threw on the first clothes he could find, and ran into the living room. Madara had already found out about what had happened and had taken a sedative, so he now looked like an extremely slow-witted weed smoker. He was sitting on the couch, quietly talking to someone Sasuke both wanted and didn't want to see. Naruto held Menma in his arms, and he was smiling happily. The blonde's face was covered in bandages here and there, but overall, he looked pretty good. "Hello," he noticed Sasuke and smiled uncertainly. Itachi placed a hand on his uncle's shoulder and nodded towards the kitchen. He took the child with him, giving the two a chance to talk in private. Why didn't you tell me? Uchiha was still standing, clenching his fists. Because you didn't pick up the phone, Naruto answered honestly. When I found out, it was too late. I thought you'd forgotten about me 100 times already. You thought, Sasuke responded sarcastically. If you knew the address, you could have come and asked me, instead of deciding everything yourself. And what would I say? Naruto frowned and stood up as well, so as not to look up. That you're a fucking cop, that you have my child, that you're in danger. Uchiha shouted and pursed his lips. Naruto didn't respond to this, looking down at the floor. He had thought about this so many times, but he had always refused to even hope for understanding. And now, having come face to face with his own fears, he didn't want to change anything. Thank you for taking care of Menma, he shrugged and walked over to the carrier. So what? You're just going to take him away like that? Sasuke felt his legs go weak from excitement. Yes, Naruto walked past him into the kitchen. The Uchiha watched as if from under the water as Menma was placed in the carrier, as Naruto said goodbye and thanked the others, as the door closed, leaving a ringing silence in the apartment. Madara blinked in confusion as he looked around the living room, which still bore traces of the child's presence. Is this permanent? He asked, looking at Sasuke in a completely childish manner. I thought you would persuade him to stay with us together with the baby, Itachi admitted. The younger one froze and frowned. Why should I persuade him? I don't even know this Naruto. Yes, but Menma is your child, and... What and? You need it, you persuade me. Sasuke turned around and went back into the room, loudly slamming the door. Maybe we really did it ourselves? Madara picked up the plush fox from the floor and rubbed his watery eyes. No. It has to be Sasuke. Naruto took the news of his promotion in two ways. On the one hand, a promotion was a wonderful thing, but now his duties were purely paper. No, he would go to crime scenes, of course, but there would be no field work, no undercover operations. Maybe this is some kind of mistake, Kakashi-san? He pressed the phone to his shoulder with his ear, continuing to rock Menma. No. An order from above. Hatake was happy as hell and didn't even hide it. From above? You mean from Fugaku-san himself? There was a catch somewhere, but Naruto couldn't figure out where exactly. That's right. From the very, very top. You might not be so happy, Uzumaki sighed and put the child to bed. Okay, I'll call again in the evening. As soon as he hung up, a nasty ringing of the doorbell rang through the apartment. He didn't even realize at first that it was the doorbell that was ringing, but then he came to his senses and opened it without even looking through the peephole. He was still incredibly naive. Sasuke? Naruto froze and blinked in surprise. The Uchiha glared and looked rather menacing if it weren't for the bouquet of flowers in his hand. He shoved the bouquet under Naruto's nose and pursed his lips. Glancing over to where his brother and uncle were hiding, he winced when he saw a horrified-looking Madara. He had been having trouble sleeping since Menma was taken, running a finger across his throat. Promising his nephew a quick death if he didn't act. Move in with me, Sasuke muttered while Naruto was still in shock and staring at the flowers. What? Uzumaki turned his gaze to him, and Uchiha mentally cursed those blue, naive eyes. Menma needs a full-fledged family. He is my son, and I want to take care of him too. So move in with me, he said categorically. Naruto still stared at him silently, but stepped back, letting the guest in. Itachi and Madara quietly high-fived each other. Equals epilogue equals. Papa yeah, Menma shouted, running away from Itachi with the ladle. I know you don't like soup, but you have to eat it, it's good for you. He tried to take the ladle away from the child, but he only screamed louder, and then laughed and began telling his uncle everything he thought about the benefits of soup, in his still incomprehensible babble. Awakened by his son's loud voice, Sasuke raised his head from the stranger's chest and blinked sleepily. He doesn't want to eat Itachi's soup, Naruto, who had long since woken up, explained and ran his hand through his dark hair. Uchiha responded and dropped his head back. Why did you let him try ramen? He doesn't want to eat anything else now. He also likes tomatoes, Uzumaki said thoughtfully, still fingering his hair. The door opened slightly and Itachi poked his head inside with a completely miserable expression on his face. Help! A child slipped past his leg and ran to the edge of the bed, trying to climb onto it, still holding the ladle. Sasuke sighed and helped him, immediately laying him down next to him. Menma didn't mind and pressed himself against Naruto's side, losing interest in the kitchen utensils. You're not going to lie around all day, are you? Madara and Hashirama are coming tonight. Itachi finally got his instrument back. Hashirama should be in a hospital room by now, not hanging around visiting guests, Sasuke commented. If Izuna is born right at our table, I'll need a psychiatrist. He won't bother you anyway. The elder rolled his eyes and went off to finish cooking the soup. I should probably go to the store, by the way. Buy a cake, Naruto stirred, clearly intending to get up. Lie down, Sasuke said in a commanding tone, raising his head in sync with his son and frowning at the blonde. Okay, don't eat me, he grinned and with a sigh ruffled his boy's hair. Menma snuggled closer to his side, and Sasuke sighed and nuzzled his collarbone before pressing his cheek to his chest again. He couldn't help but smile as he listened to the steady beat of his heart. Who knew they would actually become a real family? Madara called it fate, and Itachi smiled indulgently and said, "You stupid little brother, you'll understand in time." And Sasuke understood. This was what his personal happiness looked like. The doorbell rang twice, and Itachi raised his head, distracted from the TV. Who could come on Sunday without an invitation? Maybe the neighbors needed something? Oh, if only not the Jehovah's Witnesses, although Madara had scared them so much last time with satanic songs under Sasuke's crazy laughter that it was unlikely that any sectarians would ring their doorbell now. He got up from the couch, brushing cookie crumbs off his shirt. It seemed that neither Madara nor Sasuke were going to answer the call. Moving lazily around the apartment, he shuffled his slippers to the door, without even looking through the peephole, and opened it. The hallway was empty. Was someone making a joke? Or perhaps while he was rolling off the couch, the callers had managed to leave, thinking that no one was home. There were some strange sounds from below, and Uchiha lowered his head. A large dark blue baby carrier stood on the rug, covering the sign "Get Lost." Sasuke and Madara had a specific sense of humor. Something moved inside the cradle, and Itachi blinked. It didn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that there was a living child lying there. An envelope stood out on the light beige blanket, and he bent down to pick it up and open it. "This is your child. I'm sorry I had to leave him like this, but I need to leave urgently. It won't be for long. You didn't answer your phone, so here it is. His name is Menma. Please take care of him. With love, and you." Uchiha read and looked down again at the cradle where the child was sleeping. He knew that the child was not his, because he had been in a steady relationship for a couple of years already, but that didn't make it any easier. Itachi carefully carried the package into the house and placed it on the couch. Okay. Good. The child was not his, because he was a beta and dating a fellow beta man. But his uncle and brother were alphas who did not deny themselves one-night stands. Sasuke, Madara, come here. He ran his eyes over the lines again and swallowed hard. He pulled back the blanket a little and sighed. Well, yes, Uchiha. Jet black hair and pale skin even at that age. Besides, the sender somehow got into their apartment building and left the cradle right outside their door, which meant he knew exactly who to leave it to. Sasuke stumbled out of the room, boring his brother with a heavy look, his whole appearance conveying that he hadn't slept half the night, and their uncle, who was barely older than Itachi, responded discontentedly from somewhere in the kitchen, but then nevertheless went out into the living room, wiping his face with cucumber slices as he went. What? Madara blew his bangs that had fallen over his eyes and stood next to him. Whose is this? Itachi pointed his finger towards the cradle. All three of them stared at the child, who, apparently sensing their attention, woke up. Menma looked around at everyone with his blue eyes, thought for a few seconds, then took a deep breath and began to cry, drowning out all other sounds with his scream. Do something. Sasuke instantly woke up and jumped away from the couch. We need to feed it, then this will shut up, Madara nodded, looking with horror at the child's face turning red from crying. What do the children eat? Itachi watched the two roommates with a detached expression. He had helped his mother with his younger brother, but that had been so long ago that all memories of taking care of children remained in his head as a blurry haze. Something soft, Sasuke reasoned. Milk? We have milk? Wait. Maybe this isn't ours at all. So it's not ours to worry about, the oldest of them grinned and snatched the paper from Itachi's hand. Who is Enyu? I think if you hadn't slept with everyone, this question wouldn't have arisen. He didn't miss the chance to tease both of them, although his voice sounded quite indifferent. Sasuke glared at his brother and headed towards the door. Hey! Where are you going? Madara narrowed his eyes unkindly. Where, to the store. The child needs to